Howdy, howdy. Jordan Jones with the Writer's Playground. And today I'm going to go over the foreword of the book Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee with help from Lisa Jones. And this foreword is written by a writer, a screenplay writer named Barry Michael Cooper. Very, very talented guy from New York City, African American born writer, producer, and director. And he's best known for the trilogy of films. They're not related. It's just kind of referred to, I guess in colloquial terms, as, Harlem Trilogy. And it is the film New Jack City, 1991, Sugar Hill, 1994, and Above the Rim, also 1994. So he's very talented. Grew up in Little Washington Heights between 164th and 165th Streets of Amsterdam Ave, which I'm sure will mean a little more to me the more research I do about New York. But as of now, I know almost nothing about New York. So, sorry, New Yorkers. I'll do my research and visit the city, and then I'll probably be able to give, maybe even revisit this book, maybe do a movie review, have some real-world insight. But as of now, never been in the city, don't know a lot about it. I just know that Harlem and Brooklyn are popping. So, the foreword's only about 5 pages or so. So I'm going to do little summaries. I'll read little quotes here and there, but let's get into it. So it starts out with saying, when Spike Lee asked me to do the foreword for his book, I felt both honored and stupefied. Honored because Lee is one of the most innovative and consistent auteurs of this decade. Black, white, yellow, whatever. Stupefied because I have never understood Brooklyn. And of this, like I said before, I don't know a lot about Brooklyn or Harlem, but he goes on to say, I'm from Harlem, the one-time capital of the black world, which, for anyone that knows about the Harlem Renaissance, which I'm sure I'll make a video about later, the Harlem Renaissance was a really big deal between the 20s and the 50s, arguably into the 60s, so that will definitely be a subject I address, but I do not know the major differences between Brooklyn and Harlem. So, yeah, sorry about that. And here's another quote, one down. When I hear the word Harlem, it brings to mind Malcolm X and 125th Street, in front of the Teresa Hotel, or James Brown playing to standing room only at the Apollo, which just brings really cool imagery to mind. It would have been cool to see James Brown playing at the Apollo. A little later down, he says, Brooklyn is the urban Alpha Centauri to me. Kind of spread out. Here's an interesting one. My earliest recollections of Brooklyn are almost chimerical. A big sun that stretched across the sky, a piece of yellow bazooka gum, heating brownstones and tenements to a brick oven red, sidewalks that ooze metallic, and July air that pushed through hot iron grates every time the A-train roared underneath. He talks about how him and his younger brother would go to an annual Christmas expedition, Abraham and Straus on Fulton Street. Don't know where that is, but he would ride the A train. That's one of the coolest things about New York to me is, you can take the train anywhere and just walk. I skate everywhere, so I would probably fit right in. A little later in the passage, he says, I remember seeing the same guidepost in Brooklyn that I had seen in my native Harlem. Fish and chips and barbecue rib joints. Loud record shops with a local Bly knit and sharkskin draped Arthur Murray's demonstrating the funky Broadway out in front. Wash and dry coin-o-mats, storefront churches, liquor stores, barbershops, number holes. And number holes are like gambling spots. But the Brooklyn of my childhood was different from Harlem in the sense that its borders expanded far beyond the Lenox to Amsterdam Avenue, 110th to 155th Street boundaries of Harlem. In Brooklyn, I seemed to see black faces for miles and miles. If Harlem was the emotional capital of the world, then Brooklyn's Bedford-Stuy, Fort Greene, Crown Heights, and Brownsville had to be our collective solar system. He ends up talking about how in 1975 he was not a fan of Brooklyn. He ended up playing in Brooklyn, on the basketball team growing up. Coming from Harlem, he talks a little bit about how he had a stage fright, kind of wasn't very good in front of crowds, which I could relate to. He talked about playing in an elimination round for the citywide summer tournament. And he talks about getting his ass whooped by a big boy, Sidney Green, 6'5", 215, and played for the New York Knicks. So that's always fun. Playing against a future pro, they give you the business, and there's not much you can do because you're normal size, and they're usually pretty big. This line is funny too. He talks about it. He says, "My man didn't enter the dragon chop across my back as I got the step on him during a fast break. Stuck me to the board 4 times, stole the ball from me 3 times, and swatted 2 of my jumpers into the bleachers. Needless to say, my Harlem whatevers were routed by the Wildcats." Oh, that's brutal when you get worked. It's brutal. Like, I guess the equivalent for me in football, I played defense. So the equivalent for me would be getting, like, trucked, or, like, the worst for me was missing a wide open tackle, which is like there's not a lot of defenders around. It's just you and the ball carrier. And if he gets past you, most likely he's running up the sideline. Those those were the worst. And you just be sitting there the next week in film just like, oh, they're about to roast my ass. But, it's part of the game. So that was interesting. Then he goes on to detail more of his history of Brooklyn, or his time in Brooklyn. In '77, he enrolled in Medgar's Evers College on Carroll Street in Brooklyn. I don't know if it's still there on the same location, but I probably should look that shit up before I started the video, but here we are now. It was a station of higher learning, strange accents, and curious black people. I call the black Brooklyn natives I encountered during that time curious because they were different from any other blacks I had known. For one thing, they were intellectuals without wearing their IQs on their sleeves, which that sounds super awesome because I've talked to some intellectual people that go out of their way to let you know how smart they are, and that shit is annoying. But yeah, just a pro tip for y'all, don't go out there with all these $10 words trying to impress people. Like, just don't do it. It's not a good look. I used to sit on Eastern Parkway smoking with the fellas and talking about how Claude McKay came up with the first on-the-road novel, Banjo. Add that to my list, reading. Decades before Kerouac. Gotta look him up. Kerouac, that's an interesting name. Whether Richard Wright's Outsider was a vivid tableau of existentialism or the greatest argument for man's need of an omniscient God. And which Rasta spot on President Street had the best jiva. I love his style of writing, how he can be formal, but also common speech, like how you and I would have a conversation. It's pretty cool. It's pretty dope. So even women in Brooklyn were different. They are more independent than the women I had known, financially, sexually, and emotionally. Every day was Sadie Hawkins Day for Brooklyn. They didn't wait on the fellas. I remember this one young lady invited me over to her house to join her and her girlfriend for horizontal troika because we hadn't been done in quite some time, she calmly told me. And for anyone that doesn't know, troika is like party of 3 in this context. It's usually more related to politics, but it's a good use. Let's skip forward a little bit more. So he talks about in '89, at this point, he's writing this, still doesn't understand it. To me, it remains a hieroglyph of millions of black symbols and characters on a papyrus of asphalt, tar, and steel. Love that line, the imagery. Black symbols and characters on a papyrus of asphalt, tar, and steel. And for those that don't know, papyrus was just a type of paper used back in the day. It's great, great imagery that he paints with that. Let's see. But I'm beginning to get some help in understanding the language in the form of a cinematic translator, Spike Lee. Spike? From his award-winning student film, Joey's Bed-Stuy Barbershop, We Cut Heads, to his first feature, She's Gotta Have It, to his newest, Do the Right Thing, Lee has done more to demystify the black experience, not only in Brooklyn, but nationally, and in a psychic sense, globally too, than any other director in recent memory, which is 100% true. Very influential. Do the Right Thing, School Days. I don't know, it's the type of thing that makes you curious. Like him, he had the same effect that Lenny Kravitz had on me, where I was like, oh wow, black people do this too, and because you don't see it very often. So I think that's the one thing about Spike Lee I admire the most, is he made his mark in cinema, and he did it his way, and you can just tell in his movies he really cares about his craft, and it translates. It's really, not to sound cliche and say, oh, it's inspiring, but I mean, it is. Sometimes cliches are the best words. It's definitely inspiring and it makes you more curious, if anything else. That's why I love this book. As soon as I found it, I was like, oh man, they do a deep dive on the script, and I get to kind of pick his brain in a sense and see his journal through the process of making the book. Oh, this is it. So, I mean, making the movie, this is it. So, pretty cool, pretty cool. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. And She's Gotta Have It. Lee sketched a black and white and hot all over composite of a skeezer with scruples, Nola Darling. The film not only iconoblasted black sexual totemism, Lola with the notches on her bra strap, her three suitors as the notched ones, but also showcased black people as something more than exotica and erotica, which exotica is, I did a video on it actually in one of my $10 word videos, so that should be up there. Exotica is things excitingly different or unusual. Exotic theme or nature. And erotica is, I'm not even going to look up Merriam-Webster, related to sex, pretty much. Sex, sexual, sex. Which has always been a long time thing with the black community. We've never been bothered to been understood as people, what we like, our culture, American culture, through the black lens, I guess you could say. And also, yeah, we're all, supposed to be mandingos and wops, and, we're a little more than all that. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Sexual totemism. So, I also did a video on totemism, busted out. Totemism means belief in kinship with or a mystical relationship between a group or an individual and a totem, a symbolic statue or figure, something like that. But in this case, it will be a system of social organization based on totemic affiliations, would be the second one, which is basically just, how would you say, like, almost like sexual pedestalizing, or like, just kind of pigeonholed us, and oh, that's a tough one. I'm going to have to come back to that. It's an interesting play on words there. Makes sense. For all of Nola's vim, vigor, and hump, Lee pictures a lonely conquistadora at the end of the film, sitting on her empty bed, framed by flickering candles and dim windows. Nola's empty expression had been the best prologue yet to the sexual terrorism of age, which kicked to serious bass tempo just months later. Which is wild for my generation, because I'm 27 myself, and AIDS was always that thing that my parents and other people would talk about, but we didn't live through the scare, so it's just kind of something we hear about. It's like, oh, don't want to get AIDS or HIV, but when it first came out and there was absolutely no cure and hope, I could just imagine the raw terror. I'm sure there was way less sex going down after that. Because, no one wants to get AIDS. That would be a problem, low-key. Next line. Troublemaker. That Spike Lee is a troublemaker. That's another thing about fellas from Brooklyn. They like to start trouble. When the guys around my block in Harlem heard about the string of robberies and assaults outside of Madison Square Garden after the Jacksons' 1984 victory tour, they immediately said, "It's them country knucklehead niggas from Bed-Stuy and DeVille. They still snatching chains. They still wearing them big Fred Williamson Hell Up in Harlem hats." I gotta look that up. Hell Up in Harlem hats. They started it. No home training having bastards. They just like to fight. The brothers from Brooklyn indeed seem to enjoy the big beatdown. Look at Mike Tyson. Look at Mark Brylin. Look at Spike Lee, for that matter. Although Spike Lee throws down more intellectually. Although, he might have hands in real life. Who knows? What black person in their right mind would dare to make a film about the hush-hush caste system that exists between us, as Lee did in School Days? Even stage an MGM lavish dance number called Straight and Nappy to underscore the point. Yeah, he was pushing boundaries. You want to talk about a trailblazer? That boy Spike Lee was not playing. On top of that, Who would think that a flick like School Days would turn out to be the aesthetic and financial success that it has become? Yeah, it's a cult classic at this point. I guess the point is this. Spike Lee is a typical Brooklyn knucklehead who likes to throw down because he's good at it. With Do the Right Thing, Lee launches a hard and swift punch to the multi-headed beast of racism, connecting with a comic but brutal blow. And I would say that's probably my favorite thing about Spike Lee's movies. He does a really good job of, injecting humor and keeping it light at times, but the scenes where he needed impact and he needed a punch, he was throwing haymakers. So you gotta appreciate that. The characters in the Bed-Stuy neighborhood where the film is set are ubiquitous inner-city archetypes. And let me go ahead and bust out the Merriam-Webster of ubiquitous. And hopefully I don't get an ad mid-read again. Ubiquitous. This word is an adjective, and it means existing or being everywhere at the same time. Encountered or widespread. So yeah, widespread. Inner city archetypes. Demare is the local wino expediter and fountainhead of wisdom drawn from a cracked cistern of hard knocks. Mother Sister sits in her window watching and listening to everything and everyone. Street corner triumvirate of ML, Sweet Dick Willie, and Coconut Sid, which is just like a group of three, or like a gang of three, are anachronistic men from Athens, sitting on a cinder block, Mars Hill, talking more doo-doo than X-Lax, and believing every word of it. And let me give you a stick for your listening pleasure, so you know what the fuck's going on. Anachronistic is an error in chronology. An error in chronology is just the order thing. Especially a chronological misplacing of persons, events, objects, or customs in regard to each other. Or a person or thing that is chronologically out of place, especially one from a former age that is incongruous in the present. Which, incongruous is like not harmonious or disagreeable or unsuitable. You get the picture. Radio Raheem and Bugging Out are the neighborhood knucklehead come rabble rousers, powered by the hip-hop Magna Carta of Public Enemy's Fight the Power. This is the dopest part about the book to me, is just kind of seeing the character develop, especially once I start getting into Spike Lee's journal entries and seeing him kind of flesh out thoughts about different characters, and then see how they develop in a script, and then actually see the finished product on screen. It's really fascinating. It's super cool. There's Mookie, the hardworking but responsibility-ducking kid who delivers pizzas for Sal, the modern version of the benevolent plantation owner. And that's where the crisis of the movie takes place, in Sal's famous pizzeria, on the hottest day of the summer, when pigmentation, pride, and culture have the most volatile chemistry. Taking notes from the Howard Beach incident, the Michael Stewart and Eleanor Bumpers murder, and the Tawana Bradley mystery, Lee has put together a cinematic memo meant to put the powers that be on notice. We will not sit back and patiently take the abuse any longer. Which is sad, man. There's so many tragedies in the black community. Like, I've never heard of any of those incidents. The Howard Beach incident or Michael Stewart. But, over the decades, they just keep stacking up. They're more and more. It's sad to see, but, I guess that's the way of the world. I took a dark note. Didn't mean to bring down the vibe, but you know how it is out there. The film is meant to foster heated discussion of the race problem, not only in Brooklyn or New York City, but in America. Some people might charge that it's out to investigate a few racial confrontations. What Do the Right Thing will not do is leave you apathetic. It definitely won't. Did the movie have any effect on me? Let's put it like this. I hadn't eaten a burger in 2 months, but after viewing Do the Right Thing, I stumbled into McDonald's and gorged myself on 2 Big Macs. I didn't know where I was, or for a while who I was. Came out of the movie asking myself, is the world that mean and mixed up? And if it is, will we let it go from bad to worse? But don't take my word for it. Go to an air-conditioned theater this steamy summer and sweat it out for yourself. Barry Michael Cooper. Man, so excited to get into this book, and that was very well written by Mr. Cooper, very talented writer. Gave Spike his flowers, which I love, and gave us a little interesting background on his life experiences in Brooklyn, which helpful to me because, like I said, I don't know anything about New York City. Coming up next week, we will dive into more of the book, do the actual journal, which, if I'm seeing correctly, yes, it's about 82 pages, so I'll probably break it up into sections, just so I don't make one, like, 3-hour video. We'll kind of break it up. Also, I will be doing a section soon on newspapers. Through my work, my day job, I refinish antique furniture, and sometimes we find old-ass newspapers from, like, the 40s and 50s, and I might throw a couple of those in there, just because it's kind of interesting seeing some of the articles you'll see, or, like, I found an old, I think, newspaper from 1956 today, and it had, like, a list of music, like a catalog, kind of like, in the sales section. It was like Nat Cole and the Beatles, all these bands, but at the time they had just come out, so it was really cool to see. The albums, of course, were super cheap. So yeah, that'll be something I'm adding. Still getting used to editing, and when my fancy little mic camera setup comes in, I'll be able to do some actual video, do some better audio, and it should help the pod. But for now, I'm roughing it with my little janky iPhone headphones, and I'm making it work. So rock with your boy. I'll have more content coming soon, and for now, I am out.